It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome into a special crossover edition of In the Huddle and Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman, co-host of Take Command and the Hoffman Show in D.C. on the Team 980 every weekday afternoon. My co-host on Take Command is Logan Paulsen, played 10 years in the NFL. For those that are unfamiliar from the In the Huddle audience, that's us. For the Take Command audience, I think you probably know our co-hosts anyway. Brian Baldinger, of course, NFL Films and Odyssey Sports, NFL Insider, and the great Jason Canfora, NFL Insider for Odyssey Sports as well. Also hosts afternoons on 105.7 in Baltimore. Fellas, I'm excited to do this. How's everybody doing?
Hey, it's a good time of the year. You know, we're counting down the days, pretty soon the hours to to the draft, which everybody looks forward to. I mean, it's the highlight of the offseason.
No doubt about it. So we got the draft talk coming for sure, but we had some major news this week that we want to react to first in the NFC East. Jalen Hurts signs what is the most lucrative extension in NFL history, the way it is currently constructed, and also the way it exists right now before Joe Burrow signs his. 5 years, $255 million at the 255, biggest number ever. 51 average per year, biggest number ever. Baldy, I'll start with you. You're a Philly guy. Like, what did you make of the decision and kind of the way this is structured for Philly and how it positions them not only this year but for the next few years?
Well, just think about this. Jalen Hurts was going into his final year of his contract, fourth year. The Super Bowl ended February 13th. They got this deal done on April 17th. In 2 months, they got this deal done, the most lucrative deal for any quarterback in the history of the game. And not even a whisper about it. You got adults in a room. It's a win-win. The Eagles feel good about Jalen going forward. Jalen loves the deal. It's the way you hope negotiations can go. And Jalen Hurts is 24 years old. I think he's only going to get better. He's the ultimate leader. They've got their quarterback for the future locked up without even like an ounce of acrimony from either side. And I mean, not every deal obviously gets done like this, but the Eagles have a history of this going back to McNabb. They did this with Carson Wentz after his third year, gave him the highest guaranteed signing bonus of all time, $107.9 million. Like, they understand the market and that this thing is never going to shrink. It's only going to go up. And so they just get ahead of the curve and they get their guys locked up. It was a great deal. And, Eagles are in good shape going forward.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you're obviously a big Philly guy and you're a student of the game, is this deal prohibitive to their prior team building philosophy? Like, one of the things about the Eagles is they had the best roster in the NFL. And is that now a sustainable solution for the next 5-6 years, with this big contract around their neck? And I know Jalen Hurts is an excellent player, but I think back to the Seattle Seahawks and those teams with the great defenses, and the second they paid Russell Wilson, all that kind of deteriorated. Like, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Logan, if you just look at the breakdown of what it's going to hit, I mean, Jason probably might have the numbers, but I mean, the salary cap hits, Logan, are over the next 4 years. There's not a year where they count $40 million to the cap, and so they were able to maintain Fletcher Cox and bring back Brandon Graham and some veteran players, and Jason Kelce is back. They lost a couple guys, but for the most part, the core of the team, including both starting corners, are all coming back, and nobody thought any of that was possible. Now, going forward to your question, they might not, but Lane Johnson got an extension this year. They let Isaac Seumalo, Miles Sanders, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they walked, but they weren't going to keep all these guys, and so I think they do a good job managing the cap, period.
Jason, what can you tell us about the numbers and what this means for the market for the next couple of guys? And then we'll circle back around to what this means for the rest of the NFC East.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, to echo Baldy's sentiments, it's the nature in which this was done, right? There was no leaks. There was no our camp, their camp. There was no our version of numbers, your version of numbers. There wasn't a whole lot of chatter about it, but there was an industry-wide expectation that this will get done because that's the way that owner works and that's the way the GM works. and the player really wants to be there, and they built a system around them. And you don't wait long. You don't let this go longer than it should. You pounce after that third year when you know the player is someone of this stature. I haven't seen the full deal, but I've seen enough of it to be able to kind of piece together. You're going to see rolling option bonuses from year to year that are fully guaranteed at signing, but are prorated over the length of the contract. So, and we're talking, they're controlling him for 6 years. It's 5 new years on top of the year they already had. So what does it do for the market? I mean, if you're the team, you're saying, well, really, we've got him for 6 years. So it's 43 a year, which is pretty good for us. If you're Jalen Hurts, you're looking at the new money saying, hey, my new money is over 50. So I have set a standard, so you can kind of finagle this and fudge this, right, to your liking. Like whichever side you're on, management or labor, you're going to find things in here that you like. But the bottom line is it was done quickly. It was done amicably. And both sides are really happy with it. And, yeah, they're going to be able to keep adding players. The reality is if you're going through with a guy on a franchise tag, the way these quarterback salaries are going, that's when you get screwed. That's when you get handcuffed. That's when a dude's carrying $35, $40, $50 million in 1 year in a cap and cash scenario, right? So I think the Eagles will be just fine. And we get so caught up in the salary cap. It is such a fungible, like malleable number. It's anything but a hard cap. You could go 70, 80 million over at any given year. The Browns did it. They didn't win anything for it, but go look at their cash spend versus the cap. Look at what the Rams have done. Look at what the Bucks did to sort of, fuel their run. So don't cut these billionaires any slack, man. They pay the people they want to pay, and they've got oodles and oodles and oodles of money to do so.
Just for some context, I think just comparing the two deals, comparing what Lamar was asking for compared to what Jalen got, can you give maybe the fans some context? Because, to me, this Jalen Hurts deal, Jason was kind of hitting on it, just how team-friendly it is compared to what Lamar was asking for, which is, $240 million guaranteed.
Well, this Lamar deal should have been done at least 2 years ago, and so I just think, Logan, and this is not a knock on Lamar, you need agents to go in there and do this stuff. Players can't sit on the outside and just say, write me a check. It doesn't work that way. There's structures, there's context. These contracts are portfolios. They're thick. There's a lot of language, there's a lot of legal stuff that gets involved. We just see the outside number, $51 million a year for Jalen. But we don't see what Jason is sort of. I just felt like Lamar would have benefited by having Drew Rosenhaus or somebody in there that does this every single year with elite prospects and elite talent to get the maximum worth for him. And he chose not to do that. And I think and I'm not saying it's just because I have an agent. I mean, the Ravens are culpable in a lot of this as well. So one side did it one way, the other side's doing it another way, and it's not working very well.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, though, is that this contract structure, Jalen sets, $50 million a year. It's this great big number. But the structure of the deal is the thing that helps the team out, is the thing that gets the deal done. And like you're saying, Baldy, is that because of that structure, it works well for both parties. And Lamar from what I understand, has not been very flexible on that. So just, fans in this area specifically in Washington have been like, oh, why isn't Lamar signed? And a little bit of it's that nuance of the contract structure that makes a difference for a guy like Lamar as opposed to Jalen.
Well, this is also something where the NFLPA is pushing for these fully guaranteed contracts, and I understand why, but you lose some of that fungibility with the salary cap that Jason was talking about. If they want fully guaranteed contracts, then you're not going to see some of the cash go to guys because they can't move it around and can't make the numbers work on the back end. A lot of this is just accounting. And when you go cap cash tied together, which is what a fully guaranteed contract is, you lose that flexibility. So I actually don't know that fully guaranteed contracts, well, I understand getting as much money as possible is obviously the goal. What I'm saying is I don't know that fully guaranteed contracts are ultimately, the way the NFL salary cap is structured, going to be the thing that gets guys the actual most money over time. I think you could probably see shorter guaranteed contracts where there's not as much reason to move it. But like you said, the structure here is what makes this deal and also allows for the Eagles to continue to build over the next couple of years. By the way, also the fact they've got a bunch of draft picks and a bunch of young guys that are making rookie deals tends to help, which kind of gets us to the, okay, what does this mean for the NFC East portion of the discussion? Obviously, Washington's going to go with how Dak is, we'll see what version of him shows up this year in Dallas, and they've lost some pieces, reconfigured a couple of things. The Giants re-signed Daniel Jones for, on kind of a similar structure, but junior version of the money. And then you have Philly coming off a Super Bowl appearance where traditionally the loser of the Super Bowl has had an off year, but based off their roster, I don't see that coming. How do we stack up this division? Baldy, we'll circle back around to you to get started.
Well, look, the Eagles won their first 8 games of the year last year. We're 8-0, and Washington beat them in week 9. And they ran the ball really good. Brian Robinson had a good game. They ran the ball well that day. And immediately, the Eagles went out and signed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. Like, literally the next day. Like, we're not going to let this happen again. Like, that's just the reaction of how the Eagles operate. They're like, we lost a game. It was a blip. Washington earned the win. They got the win. They played a good game. But the Eagles, the reason why everybody's looking at the Eagles is because if they see a weakness, they address the weakness. And it goes to a little bit of, your talk here about the salary cap and how malleable it is. Like, okay, salary cap. We need defensive linemen. We got to plug these leaks. They fixed it. So they have the core of their team back. They still have the best offensive line of football. They've got an elite receiving core. Like they lost their coordinators, but they've already made the adjustment. I think everybody's looking up at the Eagles at this point. I could go through the rest of the division, but to me, everybody's chasing Philadelphia.
What about like New York? Obviously they just re-signed their quarterback. Like, what would you have done with Daniel Jones? I know there was a lot of debate about his value and, the direction that team is going.
Well, look, it was an unbelievable coaching job, to be honest with you, Logan. Like, I was there twice in training camp. And the first time I went up there, I remember their defensive coordinator telling me, man, I'm only allowed to blitz 3 times a period, Baldy. I'm making these guys look too bad. Like, they were, like, non-functional, Logan. Like, I left there going, this is the worst team, not in the NFC East or the NFC. This is the worst team in football. And there they are in the playoffs. And now, okay, so they're a playoff team. They win a playoff game. Unbelievable coaching job by Brian Dable, Wink Martindale, and the staff. Now, Saquon's not coming in off-season. Dexter Lawrence isn't coming to the offseason. He wants a deal. Like, they've already got to deal with, like, success. Like, what a pain in the ass that is. You win one playoff game, and Saquon's upset about not getting a deal, and Dexter's sitting out there. Like, that's hard. That's hard to deal with. Like, they're not good enough to act like that to me.
I think the Giants, and I wrote about this in the Washington Post, talked about the In the Huddle podcast. I don't know why they handled the franchise tag the way they did. And there was a little bit, I think, of naivete and maybe panic. They should have put the tag, the non-exclusive tag on Daniel Jones and said, look, we think your best spot is here. But if there's something out there for you and we can get 2 1s and you think it's somewhere else, go. But with a limited sample size with our guy, who we think, Abel had, we're going to use the Saquon, Go Eckler, who can't get paid or a trade. Like, and there's going to go in the first round. So we're not going to put any tag on you, Saquon. And the problem is they had 13 on the table before. They ended up panicking, putting the tag on him. Now they look at the market and say, he's got nothing. I mean, if they pulled the tag, what would he, like, where's his safety net? So he's pissed off, and I get it because, well, wait a minute. You thought I was worth more than the tag on a long-term deal that I didn't sign. And now I'm sitting here on the tag, and I'm not happy about it. But the reality is, I don't think he's got a market. So I think their misread of the running back market led them to panic on Daniel Jones because there's only one tag to go around, right? And now they've got a ticked off Saquon. Saying all that, I believe in Brian Dable. I believe in that staff. And Washington, I'm very bullish on. A lot of smart people in that organization feel good about Sam Howell. Saying all that, I don't know. The elephant in the room, right, is if we're sitting here in 3 weeks from now and Harris is the owner and it's been voted on, and there's that owners meeting next month, and everybody's on board, what's he going to think about year one with Sam Howell? And there's this 26-year-old former MVP who did all that 35 miles down the road, and there's a lot of Ravens fans pissed off right now. And what would this look like with Lamar Jackson? So I think that is the one team on the other side of the draft who you could people, including your fan base, even just by making a run at Lamar Jackson. You put an offer sheet out there, okay, the Ravens match. Guess what? No collusion case. All your billionaire buddies are like, attaboy, that one's going away. D. Smith can't say there's collusion. He got an offer sheet. Ron Rivera's not your guy. Promote Eric Bieniemy. Hey, we got this lawsuit going on. Right? There's not a lot of diversity. Every year, Troy Vincent says 5,000 questions. When's Bieniemy going to get a job? Bieniemy's got a job. Attaboy. Who's the offensive coordinator? Greg Roman doesn't have a job right now. I'm just saying, in the NFC, if they just ran the 2019 Ravens offense, which was the number one red zone offense, go look at Lamar Jackson in the red zone in 2019. With this group of weapons and this defense, they couldn't immediately compete? Really? They wouldn't be sold out? They wouldn't have a waiting list again? Yeah, they would. They'd be on prime time all the time, and that owner would be a hero.
Well, the team we haven't talked about is Dallas, and they've done a pretty good job here thus far. Just from the standpoint of defense, they kept their defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, which was essential. I think defensively they've gotten better, bringing Stephon Gilmore in. They had a real weakness all year long at the corner opposite of Diggs, so I think that really helps them. And they made the right choice in letting Zeke walk. It's a tough choice, but you can only pay one running back, and they chose to pay Tony Pollard. You can find running backs in this draft. They're in every single round. Everybody says it. They'll find one. They draft well. Dallas will be very, very competitive. But I like Washington. I like the direction they're going. I need to see more than what I've seen from Sam Howell to be convinced. Like, I'm convinced that Jalen Hurts gives you a chance to win every week. Nobody in Washington can say that about Sam Howell right now. That's not fair to Sam. He needs to be allowed to start his career. But I saw Jacoby Brissett play really well in Cleveland last year, really well. And he wasn't the reason why they were losing games. So I don't know if it's a competition or if Jacoby's just there to hold a clipboard and be the backup. I don't know how Eric's going to, run that competition if it is one.
I tend to think it's going to be a competition because Ron Rivera would like to keep his job. And if, Sam's going to start ahead, he's going to get a head start. And if they think he can surpass Jacoby, but Logan, we've talked about this a ton. Like, Brissett's a good bar. If you're better than Jacoby Brissett, you're a pretty good NFL quarterback. And if you're not, then you got Jacoby Brissett, and that's a pretty good fallback.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that's the thing. That's the interesting thing about talking to people not in the market is like, what is the perception of the quarterback situation here in Washington, right? Because I think Craig and I are so close to it. We hear Ron kind of spin it every week, but it's cool to hear Baldy say, if you think about it objectively, right, it's 19 throws in a Dallas game. And is that enough to kind of mortgage your future on? I think the interesting thing there that Jason brought up is like, if you're the new owner here, like, are you willing to pay that premium for Lamar Jackson? Not because he puts fans in the stands. Like, I think that's objectively something that would happen. But do you think he helps his team win football games at a high level, high enough to get you in playoff contention, high enough to get you to be a Super Bowl contender with that $240 million contract kind of looming over this team? Like, does this team, are they good enough to accommodate something like that? I think that's really interesting, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Jason and Baldy.
Well, I would love to see. I mean, I don't think anybody wouldn't like to see the combination of Eric Bieniemy and Lamar Jackson go to work. I mean, I'd like to see what the playbook looked like. I saw what Philadelphia did with Jalen Hurts and how they built a system around him. I mean, he became a great deep ball thrower this year because he had elite receivers. But, I would like to see Lamar do that with the Terry and Dotson, and Curtis Samuel. I'd like to see that opportunity to put the ball, down the field outside the numbers, in addition to just seeing teams scramble to try to come up with game plans to stop the running game with him and B-Rob in the backfield. Like that'd be a lot of fun. So, but that we're a long ways away from anything like that happening. Sure. It's just, a scenario to discuss, but I feel like that's a long ways away from happening at this point.
Sure. Yeah, and Jason, I think we talked about this when you came on my radio show. Like, there's a Venn diagram of contracts that the Commanders can offer, and contracts that that would be reasonable and smart, and contracts that the Ravens would match. And there's no overlap of those two pieces of a Venn diagram. So, like, yes, I hear what you're saying in terms of like, hey, like it helps the the collusion case, and Josh Harris could make some friends in the ownership group, but realistically, like, there's just no way that Baltimore lets him come here. So it's fun to dream about, and if you could acquire him, I think 100% they should do it. I just think there's zero chance that he's coming here, even with a new owner.
The worst case scenario is that this guy matches, but for the league, and you said this up to your fan base that look, this is what I'm about. You know what I mean? The days of balling on a budget and Bruce Allen saying we're winning off the field. Like, we're here to get the best football players we possibly, even if it ruffles some feathers. And you say there's not a way, but I look, money talks, and there's voidable years. And if you put a scenario out there where Lamar Jackson's making $100 million in the first month deal, does Steve Bisciotti really want to do it? And if he does, so be it. But I wouldn't say it's, especially if you view it through the prism of a financial premium, because we're on the other side of the draft and we're going to the playoffs with Lamar Jackson. So we're talking a 2024 draft pick now, after I'm raising an NFC East banner in my junk stadium now, but my new stadium's on the way. Right? Like, what is that worth?
I mean, it's worth it.
The 2-2s are in their team with Lamar Jackson. Lamar pick 25 and pick a year from now, and pick 28 the year after that, or 26. I don't know.
I mean, I hear you, but that's also best case scenario, because he's also missed time the last couple of years, and there's just no way to predict all of these different things. It's very multifactorial. We could talk about this forever. And in fact, it feels like we all have talked about this forever.
We have talked about it a lot.
So with a week left of the draft, we'll keep things moving here. It's Take Command and In the Huddle crossover episode from Odyssey Sports. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening right now. All right, let's do this. Let's all pick one player quickly, like 60 to 90 seconds apiece. Players that we think will shape the draft. Someone who, hey, when this guy goes, it's going to help shape how everything goes after him. Could be one of the quarterbacks. Could be, a player that maybe is drafted above what his position value truly is. Someone else who's just got your eye in this draft that you think is going to shape specifically the first round. Of course, worth mentioning here that Baldy and JLC will be hosting our draft show for Odyssey. You can watch that on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page and on Twitch. Logan, I'll start with you. Who's the guy that you think is going to shape the first round of the NFL draft? I'll give you first crack at it.
I mean, this is cheating because it's so obvious, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that if Bryce Young goes number one and the Houston Texans are not sold on C.J. Stroud, that's going to make one of those quarterbacks fall, Will Levis or C.J. Stroud, right? Because if C.J. Stroud is the consensus number two, Houston doesn't take him, Arizona doesn't take him, let's say Indianapolis takes him, then Will Levis is on a skid. Anthony Richardson hasn't been selected yet. So as much as that's like a boring thing to say, like, that first pick is going to be demonstratively dramatic in terms of the effect of the top 10 and where those quarterbacks fall. And it could lead to a situation where, a really good football player potentially slides down into that kind of mid-20 range and the team gets really excited. So, that's kind of the most boring one, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that first pick is very significant.
Yeah, and there's been some rumors that Houston might not actually go quarterback at 2.
Right.
That they might sit out a year and try to get in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes next year. So that becomes super interesting if the guy that they don't like winds up falling. It seems like Bryce Young's headed to Carolina, but we'll see. All right, Baldy, who's the guy for you that shapes the first round?
Well, I got to believe Jalen Carter, at this point, because, like, Jeffrey Simmons just got a $100 million deal in Tennessee last week, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been a dominant defensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans, and they've been the top defensive front in football at the very top over the last 3 years with him in there. And if you look at Jalen Carter, to me, he looks like a bigger, more athletic Jeffrey Simmons. So, obviously there's these issues off the field, and we don't need to go into any of it. But there's also a question of just his production at Georgia. And, his 3.5 sacks, anything to get excited about. Georgia runs a crazy system. Kirby Smart's smarter than all of us together. So I can't dispute what he does when you win back-to-back national championships. But, Jalen Carter could easily go number 3 to Arizona. There's no J.J. Watt. That would be a steal. If Indianapolis makes a trade with Houston and they lose to Forrest Buckner, they need somebody in the middle. If Seattle wants to be a Pete Carroll-built team, they don't look any further than Jalen Carter. Detroit is on the upcome. They won 8 of their last 10 last year. You add Jalen Carter in there with Aiden Hutchinson and what they have, they get a whole lot better. You just go through the list. The Raiders have nobody to help out Max Crosby inside. The Atlanta Falcons, they've been adding defensive pieces and, different guys, Calais Campbell, but there's nobody like Jalen Carter on that lineup. So you could just go team by team and go, he helps that team right away, having a beast like that in the middle. So to me, does he drop? Doesn't he drop? Where's he go? All that, I think, is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear everyone else's selection, but I wanted to ask you, Baldy, removing the legal stuff, the thing that gets me a little bit concerned about him is the work ethic stuff.
Yeah.
How do you weigh that? How do you weigh the risk of that, especially given, like you mentioned, he's a very special football player, very, very physically gifted, but I want to bet on a guy that's going to work, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Yeah.
So, 320-pound guys typically don't play every snap, like your defensive ends or your linebackers. So they're not that worried about making plays on the other side of the field. I'd like to see more effort. He couldn't finish his pro day. He just was gassed. Now, there's extenuating
a lot of stuff.
There's really no excuse for that. It's embarrassing. I hope he's not Albert Haynesworth. I hope he's more Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, Javon Hargrave, than what we saw from Haynesworth and what you saw from Haynesworth back in the day. But, that's why there could be a drop, because somebody's saying man, I need a better motor, because ultimately all you want in all these draft visits, all these, all the things that we do over 4 months is you just want to find, does that guy's heart, is it all about football? And if it is, then he'll get in shape, he'll play those talent. But if it isn't, you're going to have a problem on your hand.
That's why Detroit's one of my favorite landing spots for him. Get him in a room with Aiden Hutchinson, and let's see what happens. Because that dude's motor is...
Peer pressure is important.
Yeah.
That happens.
Dan Campbell.
You want to play as hard as Aiden Hutchinson, or you want to look like... what it's like, Logan, being in that film room on Monday. You don't want to be that dog that everybody's looking at. You want to be that guy that is playing harder than everybody else.
Yeah. All right, Jason, your player that's going to shape the first round. Who you got?
Well, I'm going to go at it a little differently. I'm going to say 2 teams clustered together because I think they're wild cards. And I'm with you guys. I think Jalen Carter could be the first defensive player off the board. You can get pretty good odds on that if you're into wagering on such things. And I don't think he gets past Seattle, which means maybe Anderson falls a little bit because the high-end projection, the people I talk to, that I think he's he's a good football player. Is he going to be a great football player?
Right.
But I just keep coming back to Atlanta and the Raiders clustered together. Are we really buying that 85-year-old Arthur Blank is completely sold on Desmond Ridder? Don't they protest too much about how much they love Desmond Ridder? Because I'm old enough to remember them not playing him till they absolutely had to a year ago. They rode Marcus Mariota, who really liked their backup quarterback, would have ridden him. But now he's the solution. Okay. They've passed on a lot of quarterbacks. And I can understand Arthur Blank $50 million a year. But you don't want to take a flyer on one of these kids at $5 million a year? Because that's what Lamar cost his first 5 years, $33 million, $6 a year, right? So I'm not buying that they're in on a quarterback. And the same thing with the Raiders. Josh McDaniel, best way for him to buy himself a little more time from the owner and the fans, because he's already on the hot seat, is to take a quarterback, right? I mean, what else hope more than a first-round quarterback? He's one like Anthony Richardson, who, guess what's baked into the cake? Oh, I'm going to get a few years in all likelihood, right? Like, they've got so many holes. But quarterbacks got to be, like, is anybody buying Jimmy Garoppolo playing more than 10 games this year? If just one of those teams, right, if does one of those teams jump to 2 or jump to 3, all of a sudden to get a quarterback?
It's a really interesting thought because it does seem like things always like that happen. Like some team does something that you're not expecting, and so we'll see if that's one of the two teams. I'll say for me, the Richardson, and I'll count like in a way, I guess Jason's player is Richardson and take him off the board for myself. My guy's Bijan Robinson because he might be the best football player in the draft, but he plays a position that you don't take in the first round unless a guy's really special. But I know I had Eric Edholm from NFL Media, a guy we all know, on my show yesterday, and he's probably my favorite player in the draft. And if he's going to be LaDainian Tomlinson, that seems like someone that's worth taking in the first round. And could you see a team, by the way, Jason, like Atlanta, who wants to run the football more than anything else, take him in the top 10? You could also see him fall into the 20s. You could see him fall out of the first round. And so he's, if he, let's say, goes to Atlanta.
Oh, no, you can't. I'm not buying that.
I doubt he falls out of the first round, but
he
can
fall
into the 20s.
No
he can fall into the 20s. And from there, who knows? But bigger point is like if he goes 7 to it or 8 to Atlanta, where everyone's mocking Christian Gonzalez, that bumps all the corners down. Like that reshapes the draft in a way that is really significant. So to me, Bijan's the guy that is the biggest wild card probably in this draft because he could shift every other position group because you never account for a running back in the top half of the first round.
Wait,
go ahead, Logan.
So I just want to ask, so Jason, you don't see there's any way that he falls out of the first round? No way at all?
I'll just speak for Jason.
Yeah.
Like I don't believe, Logan, that he could ever get past Dallas at 26.
Right.
Like that's such a Dallas pick at 26. Fowler's coming off a broken foot. Zeke's not there. McCarthy has come out and said, I want to run the ball more and better than we did a year ago.
Right.
Like he's the perfect fit in that offense, which is a star-studded built team led by, Micah, Dak, CD. Like you'd add Bijan to that. Like Jerry Jones' head is going to pop off.
By the way, went to Texas, so he's a Texas guy.
Right.
Star power added there.
I just was thinking, from an analytics perspective, there are, I'd say, I don't know, probably 15 teams that I spoke with at the Combine that were basically like, we won't take a running back in the first round no matter what. But I guess, like you've talked about on your podcast before, you just need one team. And I do think that, Dallas would die if that happens. So that's a great point.
Let's wrap up this crossover edition of Take Command and In the Huddle by going into Baldy and Logan's wheelhouse here. We're talking O-line. Baldy, you just put out last edition of your podcast, and you put this out in other places as well, your top 5 offensive linemen. I know you had specifically the top 5 guards on the last edition of the podcast. But, Logan, you saw Baldy's list. What caught your eye about it, and what did you want to kind of circle back to in your breakdowns here?
Yeah, I mean, like with the tackles specifically, I thought, man, Baldy's got a type. He likes big, physical athletes that like to mess people up. And, I was a little surprised that a guy like, Anton Harrison isn't on the list. You got DeJuan Jones ahead of a guy like Anton Harrison. And, I do see the value of DeJuan Jones. But, I think from a pass protection standpoint, Anthony Harrison is a little bit cleaner, and like I'm always a guy, this is my philosophy with O-line, and you could agree, Baldy, is pass protection is more of like a feel thing, and you kind of got it or you don't. It's much harder to coach, and I can always coach a guy to be a better run player. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of, why do you like the physical nature of the position so much, and why do you value that so much? And maybe why don't you look at Harrison and say he's, top 3 player in the draft?
Well, I mean, Anton Harrison's a good player. I mean, I'm just talking about top 5 here, Logan, but like just the guys I know in the Big Ten that have played against Ohio State, they'll tell you, I'll line up over Paris Johnson any day versus DeJuan Jones. I'm not beating DeJuan Jones. I can't run around him. He's a Pacific Manta out there. I can't get around him. And I can't run through him. And then you watch him, with this wingspan of being 7'5". Like you can't get to his body. Like to me, like if you want a right tackle Like, I know, Trent Brown is out there. Like, he's bigger than Trent. Like, he's just an enormous, agonizing, intimidating player. And I don't know, like, I just feel like I love Darnell Wright. He's my favorite tackle in this draft. Like, guy started 42 games, saw him pitch a shutout against Will Anderson, did the same thing the year before against Georgia, going up against Trayvon Walker. Like, he's nasty. He runs really well. That's what blew everybody away when he ran a 5 40 at, 338 pounds, whatever it was. Like,
Sick.
Those two guys on the edges, they look better. Paris Johnson's a good player, Logan, really talented player, good kid, really good kid, well coached, 1 year at tackle. Like, it's just like, I didn't see him against, Chase Young. I didn't see him against Nick Bosa. I didn't see him against those caliber players that he's going to see in the NFL, where at the end of his protections, his feet come together. He looks too thin. His ankles look too thin. Like, he doesn't look like he's going to anchor against some of these guys that can bring the heat like that right now. Like, he might grow into it.
I totally agree.
And Broderick Jones is a really good player. He's 19 starts. He didn't start national championship game 2 years ago. But I like his upside, and just because I think his sets are, so consistent and so good off the ball. And he's only 21. I know he's going to get bigger and stronger. So I'm willing to say, okay, he might still be the best tackle, Logan, 2 years from now. But I don't know that yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about Paris Johnson, because one of the things that when I watch him, physically he's got everything you want, but you watch him against Iowa, against like Lucas Van Ness, guys that are strong players, he just doesn't seem to kind of have that midsection strength the way that you need to kind of sit a bull, at a high level. And I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's not on the film. And, like Broderick Jones, there are times where the same thing, he's a little bit of a waist bender. So I'm not quite as high on both of those players. I think I'm betting on upside with Paris Johnson, so he's higher on my list. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about Djuan, because again, he's fun to like because he's so damn big. But like, do you think he faced anybody who was legitimate, like heat you up, 90-mile-an-hour speed rusher off the edge? And that's something, I have questions about, because you see the power, you see him eat the bull rushes. He eats bull rushes like it's Cinnamon Toast Crunch. You know what I'm saying? But can he compete with an elite edge speed guy at the NFL level? I
think, let's just say he lined up against Hassan Reddick week one. That's the guy you're talking about. Somebody of that caliber. Yeah. That's just got, speed and suddenness and quickness and, can ghost you. Like, that would be probably his worst nightmare. But if he gets off on the ball, Logan, he's going to be fine. It's just if he's late off the ball, he's going to get smoked against a player like that. He's just not going to be able to have the reaction time necessary. So that would be the concern. But, there's ways to work on your set where you're not late. And, you just study guys like Lane Johnson's league that actually leave before the ball snaps. So there's ways to counteract that, I believe. And that's good coaching.
And the other thing I'd say is, too, you mentioned the arm length, almost 37 inches, which is insane. But he plays with great strength through that length. So
he moves bodies, Logan. Yeah, I want guys. I see all these offenses. They're just these zone offenses. Nobody moves anybody. They're just trapping them and moving them. Laterally, but they're not moving guys off the line of scrimmage. I watched this guy move the line of scrimmage. Like, I don't know. I'm from the old school of the Hogs. I want to see Russ Grimm moving bodies, man, off the line of scrimmage. And so that's what I see from him. I see a people mover.
And definitely your list reflects that. I mean, you seem to value that skill set more than, other coaches that I've talked to, which is fine, because I think they're all going to be good football players. And one of the reasons they're going to be good football players is because they're physical as heck. So,
well, Logan, nothing irritates defenses more or quicker than teams that run the ball down your throats. Like, the bickering and the finger pointing during plays is just I'll never get tired of watching that. Yeah. And that's when you start breaking another team's sword. That's why I put such a premium on it. If you just lean on these guys, I don't care what their names are in the back of the jersey, they all act the same when you're just, popping those runs in the fourth quarter after leaning on them for the first three. And so, to me, that's still a great way to win football games.
Last thing real quick, kind of throw this around to everybody. Logan, we've touched on this a little bit on our pod, but as I look at more of these lists, and Baldy, you just mentioned like Darnell Wright's your favorite guy in this draft. He's also a right tackle, which is typically not two things that go together, where the left tackle has been for decades the more valued position. How, if you guys have all talked to coaches and executives around the league, how has that evolved over the last couple of years where we could see a guy like Darnell Wright be the first tackle off the board, even though he probably never lines up on the left side?
Well, I mean, look, Lane Johnson is the best right tackle in football. He was the third pick in the 2013 draft. It was the right choice.
Yeah.
If you're the right tackle in this league, you see T.J. Watt, you see Von Miller, you see Joey Bosa. Like you'll see Nick, if he can't beat the left tackle, he's coming over to the right tackle. Like you're seeing at right tackle, you're seeing Hassan Reddick. I mean, you're seeing the best pass rushers. If Montez Sweat goes over there, like you're seeing the best pass rushers at right tackle, every bit that the left tackles are seeing. So you better be able to protect both edges right now in this business.
Yeah, I know, I coach some defensive linemen in the offseason, some NFL guys, and they call it, you got to find the fish, man. You got to find the weakest pass protector
exactly.
and take advantage of them, right? And so, now all these pass rushers, there's a dexterity there. They're not just rushing on the left and not just rushing on the right. J.J. Watt, TJ's brother, obviously, made a career because he could line up left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard, and find that fish. And so I think teams need to, in some ways, prioritize the position the same way. And I think that that's kind of what you're seeing with the draft is you want good offensive linemen because you need to protect your most valuable investment. Like we talked about at the top of the show, you're giving guys $50 million a year. You don't want them on the dirt. And so the way to do that is get good guys in there to protect the quarterback.
Yeah, I think there's also position flexibility to it as well, right? Like Skoronski might be the first one off the board, and he might end up being a guard, right? But here's the group, right? Like here's the pool of players, and who do we think, if it doesn't work out here, he could still really help us win there? And I just think the way teams are looking at offensive linemen on the whole has changed a little bit in certain degrees because of what a Quentin Nelson got. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this year, did he worth that money? Maybe not, but he got it for a reason. So I think it's about, trying to get someone who can help keep your quarterback from getting eviscerated. Because as Logan said, the fewer weak links you have, it's a chess match, and you don't want them to be able to get their best player lined up against your worst offensive lineman more times than not. So, I don't think it matters nearly as much as if we were talking about this in the 80s, you know what I mean? And it's like, how are we going to stop LT and the whole blindside thing from the get-go?
Yeah. Keep your quarterback from getting eviscerated. That's that insider knowledge right there. All right, Jason Canfora, Brian Baldinger from In the Huddle. I'm Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulson from Take Command. Next week for the draft, you guys have as in the Huddle guys, have the Odyssey Sports Draft Show on Odyssey Sports YouTube page, on Twitch. I think I'll be hopping on after the Commanders pick, so I'll see you guys then. Make sure whichever feed you're listening to, wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching right now, you're subscribed so that you do not miss an episode. Again, if you want to catch Jason and I live on the radio, you can do that through the free Odyssey app. I'm on the Team 980, 4 to 7 each and every weekday afternoon in DC. Jason, 2 to 6, 2 to 6:30. You get that little half-hour hook, Jason, up in Baltimore on 105.7? There we go. All right, so 2 to 6.
Hey, let me put you guys on the spot. What are the Commanders doing at 16? Do you guys have a consensus on what they're going to do right now?
If I
Deontay. We'll be talking about Deontay.
I would say, so this is what I would say. If you're looking at it from an analytics perspective, the thing that's the most valuable resource in this draft, because Baldy, you've alluded to it on your show, I'd say there's 7 starting left tackles or starting tackles, regardless of position, right? I think the problem is those guys are going to get pushed up. I think you'll probably see 4 or 5 go in the first round, leaving 2 in the second round. So in terms of need, I want to find that tackle. And then I do think this is an exceptionally deep cornerback class. So as much as I love Deontay Banks, I think he's my 3rd corner in the class. I just think you can get another guy like that at 48. So to me, I think you just got to play the draft and kind of play the analytics game a little bit. Look at the numbers, look how deep these spots are, and say, if you're looking for a tackle, you got to take him at probably 16. I think you want to trade back ideally, but 16, let's just say hypothetically for this conversation, DB, and then I think you kind of try to pick up one of those centers potentially in the third round. It's a pretty solid center class. So that's kind of what I would ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm team trade back. Just the way this draft goes and the way it's probably going to fall, the chances that the last player in your top bucket or your second bucket, depending on how sharply you're drawing your tiers, is going to go at 14 or 15, and thus you want to trade back, get value. That's my hope for them. But who knows? Maybe they get one of these guys, if like Skoronski falls, then run as fast as you can, get that card in, and go from there. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of the show, plural. And we'll see you next week, right back right here on Take Command and in the Huddle. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.